Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Now, hybrid warfare has become a defining strategy in Central and Eastern Europe, blending conventional military tactics with cyber attacks, propaganda, and economic manipulation. Over the past year, these methods have intensified, presenting new challenges for regional security and stability. As the region faces ongoing threats from Russia's hybrid war, what lessons have been learned and what lies ahead? Joining us today on TVP World is Mariia Zolkina, Head of Regional Security and Conflict Studies at the Ilko Kucheriv Democratic Initiative Foundation. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Thanks for inviting me.
So at the end of the year, I would like to round up some of the hybrid attacks that we have been observing throughout Central and Eastern European region. And well, my first question is, how would you personally assess the effectiveness of Russia's hybrid warfare against Europe?
Russia is preparing for undermining basically the very idea that Europe, either in terms of European Union or NATO, is united, and to show that this is a weak alliance or alliances from different point of view. So from this point of view, I think that Europe has to take this risk very seriously and to accept this challenge. And unfortunately for Ukraine, Ukraine was facing this hybrid warfare. However, with a component of conventional warfare like war in Donbass in between 2014 and 2022. I think in meeting these cyber war challenges, in fighting Russian propaganda, Ukrainian both public services and civil society are front runners, and they can really advise on how to do that.
Right. When it comes to Eastern Europe, what do you think we have learned in countering these hybrid threats throughout these couple of years of war?
The first and very serious lesson is that hybrid warfare is not just accidents. It's not just separate elements. It's a part of a strategy to reach some goal. For this reason, every specific accident happening either in the Baltic Sea, like breakage of the cables, or propaganda which is being spread right now not through Russia's sources, but other like secondary informational sources. All this should be treated as components of the general scheme, let's say. If you take this seriously, then you create not strategies on the paper, but actions really in practice. The second lesson from different experience, including Ukraine experience, is that cyber warfare should be treated really as another battlefield. Like recently we have seen that Ukraine, which is really digitalized country, with lots of public services being digitalized recently in last years, it has faced one of the biggest cyber attacks for several years. And what is interesting, Russia's sources of the cyber attack, they have basically attacked not only Ukrainian public service database, but also backups which were in Poland. It means that all the routes and all the channels Russia will be trying and is trying to undermine the European regional security on the different levels, information, cyber level, and don't forget about conventional warfare, because any time, any drone can anywhere in Europe appear and fly much far from the border of Ukraine.
All right, one of the trickier things that I want to discuss as well is the sowing of internal division between European countries or with the populace as a whole. And like you mentioned, a lot of effort was put into showcasing or trying to make Europe more divided than it really seems. However, we're also seeing perhaps the possibility of being hyper aware of these Russian threats. Do you think that there's a possibility where people are perhaps kind of starting to have this Red Scare situation we've seen in the States a while ago, where everyone's accusing everyone of being a Russian spy, where the discussion becomes very muddy, that we can't really have a unified front when discussing these type of threats?
Following Russian invasion and Russian aggression since 2014, I would say that we're actually in a different stage. Not when everyone is being suspected for having some suspicious links to Russia or whatever, but for everyone is being much calmer at this moment, at the end of 2024, than before, than even last year or at the beginning of the large-scale invasion in 22. Why? One of the reasons is that there is an illusion that there might be a diplomatic solution for this conflict in the nearest months. And I think that makes a lot of political elites in the European Union and in NATO to be much calmer and to be almost politically asleep. So they really have hopes that Trump administration will organize a diplomatic breakthrough and make both Russia and Ukraine sit at the table and have a peace deal, or at least a deal about a ceasefire. I think these hopes, we are not speaking that they are groundless from regional security point of view, but they are making political elites treating these challenges of the hybrid warfare in a less serious way than it should be done at this moment.
Right, like you described, perhaps a lot of people are looking at closing a chapter of the current kinetic war that we're seeing and kind of equating that to perhaps a closing of the hybrid war, which is still very real and still threatening Europe. What do you think, how do you think this hybrid warfare has already reshaped the broader security landscape in the region?
It has reshaped it in a way that even if you are trying not to escalate, or this very famous strategy of not provoking Russia, which is the basis for many actions which were taken or not actually taken by NATO as alliance. So if you are following this logic of not escalating, this doesn't mean that you will not find yourself in a situation of a war. However, this war at the first stage might be the hybrid warfare, meaning that your public services are attacked, the personal data of your citizens is attacked. The elections, which are digitalized in many countries, for instance, Estonia is a really good example of a country which is using this, including for not just for public services but for electoral process as well. This can be undermined. The very recent example from Romania, when the whole first tour of election, the first round of elections was basically considered to be illegitimate exactly because of the interference of, as they claim on the level of constitutional court, some external forces, namely Russia, who was using modern technologies, social media. So we are finding ourselves as Europe in a situation when the threat can come from something which is already a part of our life. It's not just about drones or operations under the false flag or some terrorist groups operating elsewhere. This is about social media. This is about political parties who are being indirectly financed by dictator regime, not just by Russia. And this is all to undermine the internal stability inside the European Union.
Do you think that Europe should start approaching this perhaps in a different perspective? Like you mentioned, a lot of, European leaders or people are kind of hesitant to escalate, let's say, to take stronger measure as long as it is not like bullets being fired. But as we see, like you mentioned, the cut cables, perhaps some of the sabotage action that's already taking place in Europe, these are very real threats. These are very real attack that's happening. Do you think that there should come a point where perhaps European countries should start redefining what constitutes an act of aggression?
Definitely, but I am afraid that Europe is not yet ready for that. Let's recall that the reconsideration of hard security defense strategies has started only after Russia invaded Ukraine on a large-scale level in 2022. Before that, all the defense strategies, both on a national level and on the level of NATO as an alliance, they were adapted to the situation when we are in a peaceful Europe and when Russia is possessing a threat, but not a conventional threat. So no one was expecting Russian forces would be moving elsewhere beyond Russia's borders. At this very moment, we have had lots of attempts to set up strategic frameworks for meeting the challenges in informational warfare or cyber warfare. At the same time, after every attack or after every specific accident, there is no conclusions that this is a part of a longer path when there is a long road when incrementally, step by step in different countries, Russia is building up the network of how to undermine the stability inside specific country, sub-region, and Europe as generally.
I think one of the reasons why some of the Russian hybrid attack is so effective is also the economic pressure and resources, strategic kind of dependence, energy dependence that Russia has, the stranglehold over so many different countries. Do you think that the fact that more and more countries are stepping away from their dependence and a reliance on Russia is something that perhaps can help alleviate some of the stranglehold they have in the future?
On the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, we have a rollback here. So the biggest dependence of European countries before 2022 on Russia was an energy and resources dependence, gas and oil. And regardless, the sanctions which were introduced, not in time, for instance, about the oil, which were postponed and gave Russia space to maneuver and to find other channels to not just to produce but to provide this for international market. But what we are witnessing now, the tankers from under different flags are entering Russian seaports, especially in the Black Sea. They are basically taking Russian oil, mixing it with oil from some other sources and bringing this. So there is number of journalistic investigations, but no decisions on the level of the European Union yet. No, there is neither there is a decision on the level of Romania, Bulgaria, which ports are, according to journalistic investigations, are accepting these suspicious vessels with allegedly Russian oil. So this called shadow oil fleet of Russia is something everyone is aware of, but is not ready to tackle this issue, like they were ready to cut the gas supplies to the European Union back in 2022. And again, this is a pretty risky way some of the European countries are following right now, basically underestimating the threat they are creating for themselves.
Right, perhaps there's still the tendency to try to go back to business as usual, but as we observe through these hybrid attacks, perhaps business as usual is in and of itself a risk. Thank you so much for sharing your input and insight. Appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World. Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.